What do Falcons do? We rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, the show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, the Golden Hard Dog and a lifelong sports fan. Coming back to you today with another Friday update. Guys, we are officially in the dead season for NFL football. We have about a month from now before we really can do anything with free agency. You've got the non-tampering period, the legal tampering period coming up in that meantime. A lot of coaching hires have happened. We've been surprised. Bill Belichick hasn't gotten a job. Mike Vrabel, as of the making of this video, has not gotten a job anywhere. Both of those kind of surprising to me. But we talked a little bit last week about, first off, Tom Grossi being Fan of the Year. Still, that's an amazing thing. And he included me in the video, which I am just super appreciative of. But thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. But, other things we talked about more on Falcons news. We talked about the coaching hires. We talked about Raheem Morris. We talked about Zach Robinson. We talked about Lakely. We talked about or Jimmy Lake. We talked about these guys a little bit and talked about what we're looking to see from them. But with that in mind, there's still some looming questions. I've already got a video out there about who I thought our free agent quarterback prospect should be and who I thought our draft prospect should be. I think after the Senior Bowl, there have been a few changes in the draft process for quarterback. Should we go that? Spencer Rattler is now a guy that I would say we could comfortably take in the third round as a guy to build on in the future or to learn behind a veteran. But if we do go anywhere for quarterback other than our first round pick, which again we're going to have to trade up into probably the top 3 or 4 in order to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks. If we don't do that, I don't really want to really have a day one starter quarterback from the draft. But I do think that if we pursue somebody like Rattler or Penix Jr. or Bo Nix, that we need to be looking more towards a veteran at the quarterback position. And my favorite, should he become available, would be Russell Wilson. And after that would be Kirk Cousins, both of whom would be rentals and both of whom would be guys that would hopefully help the next person, like a Spencer Rattler, like a Bo Nix, like a Michael Penix, learn and develop and turn into a Jordan Love type situation with the Packers a few years from now. That would be ideal. But we beat that horse a little bit. So today I'm going to talk very briefly about who I think our free agent target should be at the wide receiver position. Now, I also last video went through the salary cap at the very end of that video and talked about cuts that I thought I would have made. I was a little wrong on Cordell Patterson. I thought that we could cut him and save money, but I don't think we actually save anything. I think we owe him $2.5 million no matter what, so it doesn't make sense to cut him. But we still have to talk about some, the position of need here, and wide receiver is certainly one of those. We need a wide receiver too, and I'm really excited to have somebody coming from the Sean McVay tree into our offense and trying to breathe life into us to call these plays. Now, what we've seen from Sean McVay's offense is a couple of things. I do like to lean heavily on the run to set up the pass. So things like Kyron Williams this past year, Todd Gurley in the past, and even, I can't remember his name. He was not particularly good this past year and they traded him away. I can't remember who they had in the last couple of years. It's escaping me. But they have always tried to build a solid run foundation with fairly dynamic and different ways to run the ball and then set up really dynamic receiver plays. And the receivers that they've leaned on traditionally have been more of the slot guys. And that's something that we certainly do need, as we have a solid outside with Drake London and we have a solid tight end with Kyle Pitts, who can also play as that outside receiver on the other end if we need to. Certainly Arthur Smith lined him up that way, and certainly Arthur Smith never threw the ball to him that way. But again, and Kyle Pitts can play slot, but he's not built for that overall. He just doesn't have that build. He's 6'4", I think, and has like the biggest wingspan of a tight end in the NFL. He's not built to play that quick slot role, that quick small slot role. So we do need to get somebody that can play that role. We probably will do that through the draft, but if we are going to be looking for either an outside receiver or for somebody to be playing that slot receiver, we certainly can address that in free agency, and we should build some depth in free agency regardless. So with that in mind, we should have about 45 to 50 million in cap space to play with going into free agency here after we make some cuts. let's talk about some of the best availables. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take Mike Evans off the board. I have no doubt in my head that he is going to retire as a Buccaneer, and I don't think he is the piece that we need to bring in anyway. He is a dynamic receiver. I have all respect for him. He is going to have another 1,000-yard receiving season with whoever he ends up with next year. But I don't think it should be Atlanta. I think that we should pass on him even if he is available, just because I don't want to pay him, what we basically paid Julio Jones towards the end of his career for him to eventually sputter out at some point. Odell Beckham Jr. is another guy like that, big name, but can't stay healthy and really didn't have a huge role with this team this past year, even though he stayed healthy most of the season. So I don't love Odell Beckham either, even though those are probably the two biggest names in terms of veterans out there. There are some names that I do like. Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, assuming neither one of them get a deal. Tyler Boyd, actually, I think T. Higgins may still be on contract for a year, but Tyler Boyd is a guy that really doesn't have a great role on his team. Probably has at least 3 more good years of football left to play because he has not been as involved with his passing yet. He was their number 1 receiver for a time, and then you ended up with guys like T. Higgins and with Jamar Chase coming on to the Bengals and taking those targets away from him. But he still has had games where he has been incredibly solid. 12 targets, 10 receptions for 150 yards. He has those types of games in him, and he certainly would be somebody that I could see on that outside position on the other side, lining up opposite of Drake London out there. But definitely not somebody who would overshadow Drake London in terms of what our offense should be doing with him. So he would be a guy that I think we could potentially get. Spot Rack, which is one of the things that keeps up with contracts, they project him to be worth about $8.5 million a year, which, again, at 29 years old, he'll be almost 30 by the time of the season. He will turn 30 during the next football season. It's fairly reasonable to assume that, $8.5 million to $9 million is a decent salary to pay for a couple to 3 years for him. So somebody that we should definitely consider in that regard. And then just looking at the list of available players, I have a personal favorite, and it has to do with me being a Georgia guy, and it has to do with him being a pretty fracking good receiver, and that's Mecole Hardman, another guy that can fit that outside role. Mecole has spent most of his time in Kansas City. He's going to be a cheaper option. Had a touchdown in the Super Bowl. He can get open. He can make the spectacular catches. He's a guy that played really well at Georgia, has been a guy who really didn't get a chance to shine super well in Kansas City because most of his time there was spent behind guys like Tyreek and then also behind Travis Kelce in terms of receptions and looks. But definitely a guy that Kansas City saw value in bringing back for a Super Bowl run, and I think he would be worthwhile to have on our team as well. But I think he's a cheaper version of Tyler Boyd. And then a guy that I actually like a lot to play more of that slot role, and he could play either role, but I would think he could play the slot role very well, would be Curtis Samuel coming from the Washington Commies. He is 27 and a half. He'll be 28 next year, and he's a guy that I think we could comfortably pay for a 3 to 4 year deal to end his career. He's probably going to be worth about 10 to 12 million, give or take, a year. And again, I think he's somebody that we certainly could pay and could do something with. But those are probably some of my favorite options. There's a few other options that I think are worthwhile in here, and I was incorrect. T. Higgins is indeed going to be a free agent, so he would be somebody that I think we could target as well, though I think T. Higgins is going to be worth significantly more than Tyler Boyd will be. In fact, Spot Rack here tells that he's going to be projected to be somewhere over $18 million a year, which is crazy money. Another outside receiver we could potentially be looking at, though I do believe he will get re-signed by his team, Michael Pittman Jr. He had a great year this past year. He was having a connection with Anthony Richardson before Anthony Richardson got hurt. He also had a great connection with Gardner Minshew, should they keep him for a free agent. But again, it's tough to say here. I do like Michael Pittman if he's available. Chase Claypool, I have no interest in. Marquise Goodwin, I have no interest in. I'm just looking at names that are available. Van Jefferson was a failed experiment for us. I am okay with letting him walk. Sterling Shepard is a little bit long in the tooth at this point. Another guy that could potentially come back, and this will be the last one that I talk about, but it's because we have some familiarity with him, and could play that slot role because he is a smaller guy and he has familiarity with the Falcons. Olamide Zaccheaus. Olamide is going to be a free agent. He's spent time now, I believe, with the Eagles. He's spent time with Tampa Bay since he's left us. And now it's time. It could be time for him to come home on a team-friendly deal because he's not going to be. There's not going to be a huge market for him. But we do know that he has been a successful slot receiver for the Falcons in the past. He is somebody that we do have a connection to in the past, and a guy that could have a homecoming and have a solid role with the team. There would be a lot of fans that would be very happy to see him come home. But guys, that's just my thoughts. We definitely are going to be ramping up as we get into free agency. We're probably just going to be doing another video a week here for a season just to see how things go. I will do a mock draft once we know a little bit more, probably once we get into free agency and know about Calvin Ridley's contract. And I did not mention Calvin Ridley in this video specifically because, A, I don't think he comes back, even though I think he would find much more success in a much pass-friendlier team or friendlier towards him team in Atlanta now than he did with Arthur Smith. I just don't think. I think the waters are too murky there, and I don't see him coming back to us. I also think he would be a little expensive, similar to how T. Higgins would be expensive. But I also am not sure what Jacksonville is going to do, and I am very hopeful that they do sign him because I want that second-round pick. We've got a third, no matter what for him, but I want that second-rounder. That allows us a ton of mobility. We can potentially draft the wide receiver that we need for with that pick. We can potentially trade that pick plus another to bring in a guy like Justin Fields should we decide to do that. The possibilities go through the roof if we are able to get a second-round pick on. We still have good or pretty decent value with this third-rounder, but I would like to see that turn into a top 55, top 50, whatever they end up picking. I think it'd be top 55 pick. But thank you for watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And as always, rise up.